It's interesting, this formulation of excluded workers. For workers in this country and workers in the South, the first exclusion was race. It was excluded from everything. Excluded from sectors and excluded within sectors. So that meant that when we broke our way into sectors through organizing and building power, we still found ourselves at the bottom of those sectors. The labor movement has to take some of the burden for that. The failure of the labor movement to recognize black workers as a part of the working class, a fundamental part of the working class. In fact, you understand, the first working class, even before others became the working class, it was a very, very serious problem. And that problem has to be corrected. In fact, when we look at the uneven development of capitalism inside of the U.S. and understand the particular role that the South has played, very central strategic role, it's important to understand how that contributes to the crisis today. In 1940s, when the Taft-Hartley, the anti-union legislation was formed, the Southern segregationists demanded that there be a section called Right to Work. These were the right to workers, the state's right elements. These were this section. Before the Civil War and after the Civil War, the Southern states had a kind of form of regional autonomy in relationship to the United States. The federal government always had to negotiate with the South about, what it would do and what it would not do. It was rare when they sent the troops in to break up segregation and racial violence against black people, against black workers. And that came because we fought and we demanded so hard. The U.S. labor movement refused to organize in a real concerted effort in the South because of the right to work stakes, because of segregation, Southern segregation. So, for the most part, the U.S. did not have a national labor movement because they had a whole region, you understand, for the most part, that was excluded from that movement, where there was no concentration in the main. A few states, Alabama, places like that. The last real industrial organizing campaign in the South was J.P. Stevens in the 1970s. A real effort to organize an industry, a textile industry. Since then, you had no real effort to organize on an industrial basis or a sector basis. One shop at a time. One shop at a time. In North Carolina, the next sector organizing effort came with our union, the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union. And this was in 1977 when we moved to organize the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union. We understood, I'm a member of the Black Workers for Justice, other comrades are here as well. We understood that unless the labor movement was anchored in its most exploited and most oppressed sector, then the unity of the working class is always going to reflect these contradictions of exclusion. So we built the Black Workers for Justice in order to build an infrastructure in the workplace. An infrastructure that was grounded in black workers who wanted to see the unity of the working class, but a unity that was going to unite us to fight against the most exploited, most racist, most oppressive policies and structures of the society. Building this unity is not so easy, but it's absolutely necessary. And what has happened is that the labor movement, you understand, has tried to go around building that unity. There's been a kind of expediency to try to organize the working class.
Right.
That, later on, came to haunt us. So, our work at the international level really grew out of a slogan of Organize the South, to build the labor movement in the South. When we formed the Black Workers for Justice, we called ourselves a workplace-based community organization. Because that's what existed, community organizations, wasn't a labor organization. But the community had to understand that it had to have organization in the workplace. This allowed us to be embraced and welcomed as a part of the community, but to build an infrastructure in the workplace, so that we raise the issues from the community in the workplace and from the workplace in the community. What we're seeing today with the current crisis and the current attacks in Wisconsin and around the country is this separation sometimes that I hear between a worker and a consumer, almost as if it's two different kind of people talking. Well, workers this and consumers this. Our perspective on building the labor movement was to show the direct relationship between the worker and the consumer. Today, for example, the attack in Wisconsin is characterized as an attack on public sector workers. We characterize it as an attack on the public sector, and the frontal attack is on the workers that provide the services of that public sector. We think that's extremely important, so that the workers, so that the masses of people understand that this workers' power that needs to be organized is a power to defend the services that the people rely on, and not just a narrow definition of just trying to defend one's job, as if this separation between the services that the working class rely on and the jobs that they have, are altogether separate. When we formed in 1997, we brought forward the demand to have collective bargaining rights. We never said that we wanted collective bargaining rights to have powers. We said we wanted to increase our power. It's extremely important, because labor's concept of power over the last 30 years has been to be a detachment of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And that the greatest power that the labor movement has been taught to have is the power to be able to elect somebody, but not the power, to impact the functioning of society at all. So the question of workers' power, that there has to be a reorientation in our perspective. So we raised this question of collective bargaining rights. We're a small union, about 3,000, in the state, a left-wing union, so to speak, 90% African Americans, not because we only reached out to African Americans, it's because African Americans were the first ones to respond, because they were on the bottom. They needed organization to fight. When you have no democracy in the society, the only democracy that you have is democracy among the people who are organized. To decide, you understand, democratically that we need to fight, the system of oppression. This was extremely important for us. There's 650,000 public sector workers in North Carolina. We saw the demand for collective bargaining as also being a demand to engage thousands of workers beyond our union, so that it encourages self-organization of the workers, to be able to be a part of this fight for collective bargaining, so that we begin to build the labor consciousness and the class consciousness. During the NAFTA period, with the shift from the Midwest and the kind of breaking up of main industry plants, there were a number of branch plants that came down into the South. many workers in the South didn't have industrial consciousness as a part of their class consciousness. Some workers who made windshields for autos, they thought they were part of the windshield industry.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
You know, some workers who made tailpipes thought they were part of the tailpipe industry. Our view was that we had to build industrial consciousness so that the workers can have some sense of how they impact on the commodities that they manufacture. Or else, capital, you understand, still has this great power over workers who are fragmented and don't know what industry or what sector that they're part of. We formed a union called CAMU, Carolina Auto, Aerospace, and Manufacturing Workers Union. You know, it's an independent self-organization. And we built, we had about 18 plants. We had small committees in the plants. When NAFTA came, they just wiped out our committees in the private sector. But we understood that there had to be an approach to organizing that organized more than one workplace. This led us to organizing in the public sector. We had some of our members who worked in mental institutions and probably needed to be in some of them too. We were really going crazy, you know, trying to organize. Workers who were sanitation workers, one of our strike leaders, big brother named Jerry, he's here somewhere, from the Raleigh City Workers Union. So we formed the North Carolina Public Service Workers Organization and began to dig in. We appealed to several unions, the names ain't so important, about affiliation. They didn't want to touch it. United Electrical Workers Union, which is an independent union, not a part of the AFL-CIO, for a number of reasons, we can talk about it another time, accepted our affiliation. We at first was concerned that we wanted to affiliate with a union that had its main base in the public sector. We're industrial unionists, you know. But some elements who had their main base, they were so politically bad, you know, until we identified with more correct politics than anything else. So we joined the UE. A couple other points. When we, this question of internationalism, international solidarity, because of protectionism has been a very strong tendency within the labor movement all around the country. International labor solidarity, even though they had voting status in the ILO, really did not exist. They did not really reach out and have these relationships with other international unions. And you know, you have American exceptionalism, which is really a part of, you know, they got all the right answers. You know, nobody can be more democratic than the U.S. and that kind of thing. So when we filed the ILO, we were thinking about a couple of things. One, we were thinking about, you know, how capital is globalized, how there needs to be international standards, you know, and that we wanted to say, you know, that the U.S., you know, should not be exceptional, that they need to be accountable to international standards. This was extremely important. When we filed the ILO and we got a favorable ruling that North Carolina and the U.S. was out of compliance, we went to some legislators who then felt, you understand, that there may be a law that stands above U.S. law. They introduced for the first time a bill to repeal the ban on collective bargaining rights. But we haven't won that struggle yet. But it took this level of ruling, you know, in order to be able to appeal, you know, to forces in the states. But it's also helping to shape what we believe is important in terms of trade unionism and internationalism. Very, very, very important. When Mexico, trade unions in Mexico joined us and supported our petition, our complaint to the ILO, This is important for us to have this discussion with Mexican workers from Latin America that's coming in to the U.S. And this is important for us to say to workers, and especially black workers, you know, these are our brothers and sisters. You know, they are supporting us, you know, in our effort to attain, you know, a collective bargaining rights and these kind of things. Trying to find opportunities to break down the divisions that exist among the working class. But when we thought about the ILO, we didn't just think about how to lobby other governments. We thought about how to build relationships with other international unions, other national unions. This is extremely important because we can have the same attitude about the UN as many of us have about the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, you know, and the US government. You know, that all we have to do is just lobby them. There needs to be no social movement, no struggle for power, nothing on the ground. So for us, it's important that we build relationships with the new trade union initiative. We want them to go to their government, you know, and call on their government to take a stand against, you know, the U.S.'s, you know, non-compliance, you know, and we want, because we want the rank and file, we want to be beholden to our class, you know, not to anybody else.
Right.
A couple other points. Yeah, maybe one other point. I mean, I think this question of race, brothers and sisters, is extremely important. This is a very important conference here. But when you don't hear this issue mentioned in this conference, it's troubling. It's very troubling when we don't hear this issue mentioned. We know that, particularly in Wisconsin, for example, and around, you know, this issue of repealing the ban on collective bargaining that exists in southern states, you know, has not been raised. You know, now early on it wasn't raised, and we found this out coming into our own national union, which is a progressive union, that droves of black workers will come into the union, and new questions will be raised for these labor movements. New questions that the history of the labor movement has not allowed it to deal with, you know, in a very, very, very serious way. And so we think this it's important. This is going to be a factor in transforming the labor movement in this period. When we talk about excluded workers, street vendors, and all the other categories, we're essentially talking about the most oppressed sections of the working class, not just because they're in those categories, but because they've been the oppressed sector of the working class historically throughout society, and been forced in those categories because of exclusion from other areas. When they start to shape the policies and the directions of the trade unions that we belong to, then we're talking about a real important change, a real important change. So for us, the ILO, as you said, is a tool. I went to Geneva, and you know, it was very interesting. You know, I would say to be there. I wish I would have been there, you know, and there was a general strike happening in the country. Then maybe what I was saying may have been listened to a little more. So yes, you know, I think it's important to tie the using the international venues, you know, to a real struggle on the ground. Or else what happens is that we will develop a new class, a non-working class leadership in these international venues. It won't be a working class leadership. It will be a non-working class leadership. And so I think that's important. We did file another complaint with the National North American Association of Labor Commission, which is it's kind of a sidebar of NAFTA, side agreement of NAFTA. You know, with Labor, you understand, couldn't or didn't mobilize to defeat NAFTA. You know, some little deal with Clinton, you understand, that, well, we'll develop some little side agreement, you understand. Well, you know, the side agreement says that free